Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Did you enjoy coffee? I hope you took the sandwich because there won't be lunch until 1 o'clock. We're working international here, so forget about lunch 12 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock. And I hope all of you that did not download the app got some help at the registration so that you have it. Because now we want you to all look down to your phones and put some comments and remarks and questions for the next speakers coming up. And we will have some really eminent speakers on stage. We will have a panel discussion. We will first listen to them one by one, and then we will have them all on stage. So please write questions, comments, and whatever under free text under the icon dialogue in the app. Board professionalism and company profitability, that's crucial for global competitiveness. Ulf Mattsson has been CEO, director, and chairman in public and private companies, public both in Sweden and North America. And here comes the CV. Ulf has been CEO of Gambro, Capio, Mölnlycke Healthcare, and Domco Tarkett. Ulf has board experience as director and chairman from, among others, Securitas Direct, Gambro, AcadeMedia, Sanitec, QMed, and Gordon, give him a warm hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
You don't stay very long at.
No.
I'm sorry. You will share some case stories with us, right?
Yes, I'll try to do that. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on this Friday the 13th. It's a good day to speak. It's quite humbling to speak under this headline. And I have been asked to specifically talk about some of my experiences of CSR, internationalization, diversity, and business intelligence, and all this in 10 minutes. A nice challenge, and I have approached this, as I'm sure you all appreciate, by preparing myself. And last night it dawned on me that it could be good to have a script, so I have a script. My perspective is influenced by a relatively extensive international experience. I'm Swedish native, but I lived and worked in 5 different countries, 15 years outside Sweden, and some years I've had over 220 traveling days, which is about as many days as most employees work almost. So, and in fact, this experience has taught me that there are actually not that many Ulfs in the world. Me and my wife, we have tried to change that. So when we lived abroad, we named all our children Ulf. Even the girls. So CSR, or sustainability, or I like the concept of shared value, which is slightly wider and has been defined by Professor Michael Porter. Shared value is about how companies can embed strategies in their business model that increase growth and profit, and at the same time have a positive impact on society. In other words, social value and economic value at the same time. I find it quite encouraging that one of the leading professors at Harvard Business School, which can be considered the West Point of capitalism, is actually raising these issues, and it gives hope for a sustainable world. Now I would like you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine a board of directors leading and defining, together with the management, a strategy implementing win-win solutions between business and society in order to create shared value. The board is instrumental in defining the strategic focus to be the quality of service that is central to the well-being of society, and views profit and value creation as the consequence of delivering social value. The board and management is supported by a shareholder, encouraging a long-term view with a clear governance based on strict division of responsibilities between shareholder, board, and the management. Can you see that company? Can you imagine that company? Have you experienced that company? I actually have the exceptional privilege of being the chairman of such a company. AcadeMedia. For you who don't know AcadeMedia, AcadeMedia is an education company with schools from kindergartens through K-12 and with adult education. We are by far the largest private school company in Sweden, maybe Northern Europe, with 330 schools and 90,000 students and children. AcadeMedia is one of Sweden's largest employers, with about 10,000 employees in Sweden and 2,000 in Norway. The business is publicly financed with a voucher following each student, and our income, i.e. the voucher, is defined by the cost of each municipal authority. 4 years ago, when the current board was formed, AcadeMedia had a sales of slightly above 2 billion kronor, and to date we have quadrupled the sales to over 8 billion. We have just recently started to internationalize the business. From day one, the board defined the focus on quality with a simple logic that if we have the best quality, we will attract more students than anyone else. If we attract more students than anyone else, it will be easy for us to run the schools. If it's easy to run the schools, it will also be profitable, and we will create shareholder value. As a consequence, we will make a sustainable contribution to society directly for all our students, parents and employees, and indirectly through competitive forces. Our ability to innovate will make the public schools better. I could talk about AcadeMedia's quality system for hours, but Bella won't let me because I'm on a strict time schedule here and I'm not finished, so I have to use a few more words. So I'm going to move swiftly on to compliance, and compliance in an anti-corruption, from an anti-corruption point of view. In an international perspective, compliance is an important topic for the board, especially if you consider going into an emerging market. There are examples when boards have underestimated the complexity. I won't mention any names. Telia has probably done it. My conclusion is that zero tolerance is the only policy available. However, that's easier said than done. My first assignment as a chief executive was as a managing director of one of Tarkett's businesses in the UK and Ireland. As a 29-year-old, I was sent to London to replace a managing director who couldn't keep his money and the company's money apart. The business was exceptionally badly run, which was good for me because I had a lot of knobs to turn to achieve a turnaround. I had to have police protection for a while, but that's a longer story. In that process, I learned, with the help of our auditors, that what was not okay in Sweden was okay in the UK. And what I have learned during my career is that what was okay yesterday is not okay today. And I'm sure that what is okay today is not going to be okay tomorrow. And this is a dilemma for a board of directors, to handle the geographical differences of business practice and also handle the change of standards in business practice and regulation over time. And as a board, you're always evaluated in hindsight. So you have to be more forward-thinking and take these issues seriously. I've had to deal with compliance in global businesses, and I've been involved with Gambro, Mölnlycke, and Tarkett. And my approach has been to implement a whistleblowing policy, stop any non-compliant behavior as soon as it gets to my attention, and then at all times communicate the zero tolerance. Moving swiftly over to diversity. I'm a strong believer in diversity. However, in a wider sense than the Swedish gender-focused debate. When I moved back to Sweden, I found the boards very homogeneous and not very diverse. Though they had an above-average number of women in them, they were still not diverse. I found them very domestic. I just came from a company where the executive team consisted of 5 individuals with 5 different passports. In my board, I had board members from the US, Canada, Italy, Benelux, France, and myself from Sweden. I believe it's imperative to have relevant diversity in terms of gender, cultural, geographical, and professional experience, but fit for the strategy that the company is facing. In the perspective of internationalization, it's important with an international diversity. A challenge is obviously distance and time if you want to create a global board. When we are working, some people are sleeping on the globe. We have assembled a board in the past 12 months in Itslearning, which is a software company. And the US is an important market opportunity for us. So we have recruited a new board member who lives in Los Angeles, 9 hours behind us in time, a woman. She happens to be a woman. She's considered one of the top 5 most respected in the area where we needed the competence. In total, we have now 4 nationalities from relevant markets represented. We have to cope with the time difference and with the distance. Our member from Los Angeles participates 2 times here in Europe, 2 board meetings. We have 1 board meeting in the US. We meet her halfway on the East Coast. And the rest she attends over video conferencing. And then we start the board meeting in the late afternoon, so she doesn't have to wake up in the middle of the night. I'm now realizing that I'm running out of time. And just a quick word about business intelligence. I think that one of the board's most important tasks is to be engaged in the developing the strategy and approving the strategy. So obviously business intelligence is of utmost importance to actually be able to do a good job in that. So in conclusion, in a global environment, virtually every business is in a global environment. The boards have to engage and actively lead in all these 4 important areas to develop a sustainable business. There are no shortcuts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ulf. Please stay. We will have enjoyed the company of the President and CEO of the Oslo Stock Exchange. Please welcome Bente Landsnes. Bente, I saw that you were taking some notes while Ulf was speaking. Do you have any comments or remarks on his presentation?
Yeah, well, I had to, because you told me to.
So, yes, I did. I'm happy to be in charge of you today, which I probably never will ever. So I enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Talking about social responsibility, it's not difficult to do that when you have school children, is it?
No.
No. It's more difficult maybe for somebody else, but I believe in the Nordics, social responsibility has always been a part of the industries we have here in the Nordic countries, social democratic countries, and somehow when CSR became, the new thing. It was not a new thing, but I've seen companies that have, appointed one CSR director, and that person became the alibi of the company because they didn't actually live by their heart or in the head, but by that only one person in maybe a company with 10,000 employees. So somehow I think it's not only true to the business, but it must be in your heart, in the whole company's heart, not only by one person. And you know, as a CEO in Exchange, I do believe it's very important that we are not always demanding that you have to write, you know, this about this alibi. I've seen, especially in US, you can make a catalog of your CSR activities. We just want a one-pager about how you're thinking, and it should be like that. It should not be a very huge task to write about what you're doing. When it comes to compliance, that's especially fraud and corruption, it's very difficult, and companies tend to step into this when they go into other cultures, even though they can step into it also in the Nordics. But you somehow you're able to, you know, move the limits and the limitation. If one, especially the CEO in an organization, thinks that it's okay to do like this to get into Iraq, then suddenly it's okay to do the same if you go into China. And maybe you're moving your limitation of what is acceptable within that company, also when you do it in Sweden or in Norway. So, and in hindsight, it's always like, yes, what we did in Norway in the 90s is not okay today, but it was okay then. And we have seen people, Norwegians in the newspapers today, you know, being framed by what they did in 95. But everybody did it in 95. They attended dinners and whatever they shouldn't have attended today. But somehow I always try to, I say to my own employees, because as an exchange we can, you know, never step on the wrong step. I said, well, if you're in doubt, you can ask me. And if I'm not there, think about this, what you're going to do right now will be on the front page of Dagens Industri tomorrow. If that's okay, it's probably okay. But somehow you have to live today. You can't foresee what will be allowed in 10 years' time. I mean, we won't know. And diversity? You want me to talk about diversity?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Diversity becomes more natural in Norway, I think. Not the first year of the quota law, but today we're really not thinking about it. It's it probably had to, in Norway at least, to be a law to make a change, because at the time when they were discussing the law, we had approximately, you know, 5 to 6% women on boards. And I think the only way to move it was to have a law. The exchange was against the law. We don't like laws, and one of the reasons is that we do sincerely mean, and we still do, that the competence of the board is the most important, should be priority one for the board of directors of our company.
And this was 2004, right? 10 years ago. Fully
Yes,
implemented 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they started implementing from 2006 till 2009. We have two classes in Norway. We have public limited companies, where the law apply, and we have limited companies where it doesn't apply. And on the limited companies, we have, you know, 16-17% women on board. We had 16-17%, and we have 16-17%. For the public limited companies, we were, when it started, 8-9%. Today it's 40.
40.
40.
And
the law says 40, and it's 40.
And that has had some effect on profitability as well?
I do believe it's impossible to prove if a company had done other ways with another board of directors over these years, because you had to compare it somewhere, and you can't do that. If you look at the larger Norwegian companies that the law applies to, they have all been doing very well since 2008-9. And Norway has, of course, been luckily in a part of the world where companies still were able to do it well. So it's nothing that, and I heard people have said that people with women on board are doing lousy results compared to those who have only men on board. But who can prove that? I mean, it's, and even if they were right, that would mean that the 60% of the men on that board, they had no influence on the decisions. I mean, would they? No, so I don't believe that, and we haven't seen that.
But what happened to the profitability with the companies that did not have to live by the law, the quota law? They're standing still in Norway.
No, they're not standing still. No.
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 They show the same profitability? Or does it have to do with...
But I mean, it's different industries, it's different... in Norway, a lot of the industries in Norway is depending on natural resources. Natural resources tend to have a high volatility. So when it goes good for everybody. When it doesn't go good, yeah. But we have had some challenges because somehow they thought when we implemented the quota that this would influence the number of executive women also, that we would have a higher number of executives from the female side, and it doesn't. It has not. Even though I think it's better in Sweden, really. But so the society and the way the people live tend to be, still from you keep your roles. If I ask you here, because I saw this morning when we were taking these notebooks, who were taking the pink ones? Yeah, it's a few men too. Good. It was only pink left, wasn't it? It was yellow and pink because I took this disappeared first. Good. But we have traditional roles, and we are trying to do some research because when families having children, it tends to be still the woman who start working part-time and continue to work part-time. So to raise more women up to executive positions is probably more important, because when you need competence in board members, somehow you need people with real competence, executive competence. You need diversity, of course. That's the real reason why you don't want women on board. So you want competence and diversity on board. And but you need the competence and the possibility for them and the willingness for them to influence the decision of the board. And if you're going to do that, you need to have been out there. You need to have some real competence.
I read an article which was a couple of years old though, but it said that several of the listed companies in Norway left the stock exchange due to the quota law.
No. No one.
Okay.
No one left.
Stupid questions are allowed. We agreed on that.
That was never a discussion, really.
Okay.
No.
Are there any negative consequences with the quota law?
It's always negative consequences of law, and I just described one of them, and I think that has to do with, the females themselves, because they tend to not own shares. And if you're going to be an important part of a board, at least I think, you should be there together with the shareholders too. And we see a lot of women are going on boards that never owe and will not owe a share.
Why is that, do you believe?
I think, I don't know really, but I think it goes back to the tradition.
But is it their choice, or is it the environment that is not?
Or their husbands. I'm not very kind now, but yes, it's more into tradition in a family, at least in Norway, that it is the husband who's doing the investment, not the wife. I believe we are not changing the society in the same way as we should, to make sure that you have the diversity in all the places, in businesses too.
But your impression today, is it that the quota law forced the companies to do this up to 40%, or is it by willingness now? You said something in the beginning that now is it?
Yeah, they have to. I mean, it's a law. So if a company doesn't comply with the law at the exchange, I'm forced to take it out. So
but do they do it reluctantly today, or are they?
No, it's not. The nomination committees have been much better, and even though I said quite early that the quota law should be on the nomination committee, not on the board, because if you have more women in the nomination committee, they will know more people. So you will have the diversity by their knowledge of people to elect and to propose.
But what do you say about diversity in general, not only the gender issue with women and men, diversity in general in Norway?
It could be better, because if you have a company where you're selling most of your products in Asia, for example, I mean, it's strange if you then have 5 or 7 Norwegians on board, and the same in the management team, because it's somehow to know what you're selling, know who you're selling to, and the products of diversity comes with it. That's why the reason why I took it away from women is the knowledge and the competence. Some of us are working in companies where the environment is changing every day. Think about those who are making mobile phones, for example. If all on the board were, 55 plus, elderly men and women, would they be the right ones to know the strategy, know how this should look 10 years' time? Nobody knows that probably today, but for tomorrow. Do you have the right competence to do that? And that's one of the reasons why we're always talking about competence, because you don't have to be 55 to be on board. You can be 25 or 20 or...
Who would you say, because Ulf talked about relevant diversity, who would you say would be in charge of choosing or defining what is relevant and not? How do you do that from a business perspective? Because you can claim that if you are young, you know cell phones better than if you're old, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with age either, if you look at the different ways of targeting humans. It doesn't mean because you need to have the business focus as well. So how do you define relevant diversity? Because just because you're Asian doesn't mean you know the market in Asia.
I think you have to look at the strategy and see what challenges you are facing, and then make sure that you have a diverse board that can represent all aspects of the challenge.
But should it be the nomination committee or should it be the board? I mean, who is defining?
I mean, it depends. I
How
think
do you investigate it?
I mean, in a public company, obviously the nomination committee has to work with the chairman, with the owners, and all that. But I mean, that's slightly simpler when it's in a private equity environment, because then a private equity owner is a lot more engaged in that selection and challenges the composition of the board together with the chairman. So it becomes a very important role and task of the chairman to actually assemble his team, and it's quite natural also. Whenever you assemble a team, the one who's going to lead the team has to put a lot of thought into it, and it's good to have maybe a disruptive thinker in there that is programmed to kind of bring elevate the discussion into to maybe a little bit out of the box discussions. I think the key is not to have a too homogeneous board. So if you have two very competent individuals but with the same experience, that's not a good thing. It's a lot better to have diversity in experience, in origin, in gender.
It's a little bit sad that we need a law.
We have good diversity up here right now.
Yes, finally, because we have some comments on that. The diversity on stage has been lousy up till now, and women, be aware, there will be a lot of women on stage in this.
Maybe I should take your dress and you can take my
No.
No, okay.
We will actually ask you what you think about a quota law in Sweden. And you have only 2 choices, yes or no. So please go ahead and vote.
We will not see.
%63 says no and 36% says yes. Which means there are some I don't knows out there. Any comments on this? Was it expected?
I think so. In this group, I think so.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that?
But I think myself, I'm in the blue group there for the simple reason that I don't believe in quoting into anything, because I think it's other things that should drive. But I just to take a school example, there's a very popular school here in the center of Stockholm where they take in about 200 students a year. Last year, guess how many boys that was accepted? This was purely on grade merits. How many boys out of the 200 was accepted? 36. So should we quote in boys that has lower grades? Absolutely not.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that? Are you comparing women with the boys having lower grades?
No, I'm just saying that clearly the women have achieved better results, and they should.
No, what I'm saying is the women that are being quoted into boards now, being board members, are equivalent to the boys having lower grades.
Oh, you're trapping me now.
Yes, I am, and I want to answer. That's exactly the prejudice that's probably the ground for a law, even though I'm personally against it myself too. But hearing that, I might press green.
No, but joking aside, I think the solution is to have more women in management positions that move up the ranks, get the right experience, and then it will solve itself. And with that, if I have 2 boys and 2 girls, children, and I'm more worried about the boys than I'm about the girls. Actually, I think the girls in the future will have. It will be easier for them, and it will be tougher for the boys.
Personally, I'm a little bit disturbed by the gender in this. I think diversity as whole is the more interesting thing, because it's in this global world and internationalization we're facing, we can't talk about men and women.
But that's about gender, right?
This is about gender, yes. Right? So you can stay on stage if you wish, or you can follow me down, because now we're going to listen to another speaker. We will have Bente and Ulf on stage after this speech. Together, the 3 of them will be here for you. So please write comments, questions, remarks on what you just heard under free text, under the icon dialogue. Now I would like to have Peter Clemensson on stage. He's chair Pricewaterhouse Coopers Sweden. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So now diversity is worse again. It's me standing here. Thank you for having me, and I am going to reflect upon what we have been talking about here today a little bit out of the concept of external reporting, being an auditor as I am. And this is an external report. This is an annual report. It is Volvo's annual report. And this is what you get sued for if it's wrong here. So Johan, I was a little bit concerned when you said that you spent 35 minutes on history and 5 hours on the future. But I know you are in very good control in Nestle, so that might be fine. But joking aside, for you who are board members, most of you, you have insight to what is happening in the company, and you know what is happening in the company. For those that do not have insights into the company, external reporting is very important, of course. And you can divide this into different kinds of reports, and that is what I'm going to comment upon. Financial reporting, as we are used to. This is very much about financial reporting. And the future then, which is often referred to as integrated reporting, including all of the aspects that we have been talking about here: sustainability, ethics, diversity, and all those kinds of stuffs. I have experienced external financial reporting now for some 30 years, being the auditor of companies like Volvo, Ericsson, Electrolux, SEB, Gambro, and OMX also, the stock exchange here in Sweden. And my experience from those years is that financial reporting, which has formed the external reporting so far, has been very much about accounting rules, developing from a quite German bank-oriented system that we used to have some 20 years ago into a more shareholder-oriented system, and the international reporting system referred to as IFRS. I'm not going to talk about IFRS here today. I could do that for many hours, but you know that the debate around IFRS has been very thorough during the years, and this thing with developing financial reporting into integrated reporting is not new. It comes and goes to some extent, but I really think that now we are in a paradigm shift where we really will go into this area. If we go before the demise of the American companies when we got SOX, before that we had some developing into integrated reporting, where best practice was defined as you have generally accepted accounting principles, but you also have industry-specific accounting principles and company-specific items. After these demises in companies like Lehman's and so forth, we have gone back to some, taking a step back, because all have been very afraid for doing wrong in the external reporting. Now we take a step forward again. Let me also start with saying that I definitely think that Nordic companies and the Nordic model has a competitive advantage based on long-term ownership responsibility, an inclusive leadership style, and self-regulation, which I think sets Nordic companies very well positioned for future competitiveness. If you look into Nordic companies' financial reporting also, they have been caught top global positions for being the best in the world, actually. And I think that that has something to do with an honest and transparent reporting that we are used to here. Now then is the time to take a step from only financial reporting to integrated reporting. And when it works, I think it's fair to say that it should have two advantages. Integrated reporting would increase internal efficiency in the company, and it will increase public trust, and thereby, with both these, delivering shareholder value, if it's done in the right way. And then what is it? What is integrated reporting? Integrated reporting is defining all the resources that are used in a company, describing that very well, describing what is the strategy in the company, describing what is the model, the business model, describing the organizational model, and then describing the output of all these resources that has put into this to the company, and defining the output of all these resources. And if this is done and presented in a logical way that makes sense to the reader, that is an integrated reporting. What is the role of the board then when it comes to integrated reporting? It has said, you said it, Ulf, the board is responsible for defining the strategy, deciding upon the business model, and in this particular case, make sure that the processes are in place to follow up and report on all these processes. If you take, for instance, that you have a goal with in the pollution area or in the ethics area or so forth, you set up the goals, but you have to make sure that you have the processes in place and the follow-up system to have a reliable reporting on it all afterwards. Some has already started this work. I think you, Thomas, referred to SKF, for instance, and I am the auditor of SKF, so I can really say that what you're saying is true. It is very important for SKF with the sustainability and the social reporting. And this year, they asked me then to give even an audit opinion on that report. So that was the first time this was done in Sweden, actually, where our audit included the social responsibility part of it all. So some have already started. In my hands here I have Volvo's annual report. They have something that they call integrated reporting here, and it describes everything that happens within Volvo: research and development, procurement, production, distribution and service, products in use even after it has left Volvo, and also recycling. And all these aspects are described in this annual report from two perspectives. And one is the value creation part of it, and one is the sustainability perspective. And all of these items are here commented upon from those two perspectives. And also, finally, all of this is then presented as what value it gives to different stakeholders. Because integrated reporting is really to report to all the stakeholders around the company what they're interested in. So in this text here, Volvo describes how much has been delivered to suppliers, for instance, 192 billion. How much has been distributed to people working within Volvo, 36 billion. How much of this value creation has been distributed to society in social costs, pension costs, and taxes? 36 plus 8 plus 4 billion. How much has been delivered to lenders in interest paid? 2 million. How much has been delivered to Volvo itself for investments? 8 billion. And how much has been distributed to shareholders? 6 billion in dividend. So all value creation done in Volvo, described from those two perspectives, has then been presented how much it distributes to all the different stakeholders. So that is, if you're interested, you should read this, because this annual report was chosen by Lars-Erik and his colleagues as the best company report for 2013. And very much, I think, Lars-Erik, based on this presentation. And if you are even more interested in integrated reporting, I can recommend this brochure, which is called then the International Integrated Reporting Framework. Because yes, when it comes to external reporting, a lot of initiatives is taken on a global level to develop these different areas. And this is today what is considered as best practice, but it is not yet fully implemented, of course, around the world. But you have a model here that describes what I said in simple terms. It looks a little bit like a nuclear factory, something like that. But it describes what I said, the input, the process, the output. And this is what companies are working with today to develop that and to take it step by step. I think that this is good if it's done the right way. But I also think that there are some risks with this. And I can see 3 risks that I want you to be aware of. Because I started to say, this is what you get sued for. If it's wrong here, And if you can find wrongdoing here even back 10 years ago sometimes, you will have to stand up for it. So you should be aware, of course, that what you write here is something that you have to be responsible for in the future. And it is very easy to use beautiful words when you report around ethical areas, of course. But it is important for you as board members to make sure that those nice words are backed up by processes in the company that you get a report from management on, so that you know that these figures and those words are the right ones. Second risk maybe is that I think that we, as I said, that we are in a paradigm shift, and I think that what you see a lot of now is happening when it comes to the market economy is that politicians are put more and more responsibility on companies. And it's very easy to take that on board and to be a good citizen. But I also think that it is important to remember that the reason why companies, the business environment, are getting more responsibility for the societal development also has to do with competition and the market economy itself. Therefore, it is of course important also that this report is limited to what makes it possible for a company to compete in the market economy in the future, because that's the fundamental of business society. And that brings us back to the nice words, that it is easy to go along to be a good citizen. And it also comes back, but that also takes us back to the importance of processes and routines around this reporting, so you use words and describe it that way. But I think, as I said, done in the right way, I think it's a great thing, and I think that it will increase efficiency within the company. I think that it will increase public trust. And finally, Bella, standing here at Handelshögskolan, talking about integrated reporting and coming back to that, I said that there's nothing new under the sun. Remember your old teacher, Professor Sven-Erik Johansson, who always said that external financial reporting should always reflect the internal management accounting as much as possible. And that you could refer to maybe as the two-step integrated model. What we're talking about now may be referred to as an all-inclusive stakeholder integrated reporting. Best way I can describe, I think, what we try to accomplish here. So please, if you have any questions.
Thank you. I have a question to start with. We'll let in the audience because there have been coming in a lot of questions for you. How can the Nordic boards of directors work strategically and integrate the four strategic themes that we're discussing today? Diversity, internationalization, business intelligence, and sustainability with the Nordic governance.
Well, I think that, as I said, the essence of Nordic companies' external reporting so far is based on long-term ownership and long-term responsibilities, and that has so far given Nordic companies an external reporting, a financial reporting that is highly trusted and delivered with honesty. Because if you are a long-term owner, you know very much about your company, then you have the comfort and the guts to report and to be open with reporting. And we know that open and honest reporting increases shareholder value. If you are very much an institutional owner, you know, with a further distance to the company, you tend more to go on what the rules and the books. And if we can continue from financial reporting into integrated reporting with that mindset, with that Nordic model in mind, I think that will just be fantastic. And it will definitely increase global competitiveness.
I think from more of a boardroom perspective, I think it's important for the board to challenge on these 4 areas the management in the development of the strategy, to make it clearly integrated in the culture and the strategy of the company.
And you think integrated reporting would be a tool for that?
Yeah, the integrated reporting is obviously a tool for that, but it's a way of making it transparent. And obviously integrated reporting in the definition you're talking is very much in the public
interest
company, also the public company perspective on the rules around that, but also the private companies can develop this a lot more.
Absolutely.
Bente, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's important from another angle too, and it's to future investors.
Yeah.
Because you're actually telling where you want to take the company, and you will then tend to attract investors that are long-term and are willing to follow you on that path, instead of maybe a lot of very short-term investors, which may be more difficult as long as you have your strategy. So the more transparent the strategy is, the better.
Thank you. I will hand over to Susanne and see what's happening in the app.
Well, we have a few comments here. You could really add comments because it's not the same streaming as it was before. But it's a question here is about diversity, and I think it's maybe it should be for Bente or well for the entire panel, I guess. It's saying like this: there are several talks about having a diverse board. Does that also include experience level? Can a 35-year-old IT professional with an aptitude for change have a role in a board?
Definitely.
Sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Finnish answer.
Yes. But that's a problem with words, because you need to often stipulate what do we mean when we talk about diversity. Men, women are different nationalities. No, it's everything, right?
But I think Connie said it well this morning when he described that the older we get, the more difficult we are to change, aren't we? I mean, you're not as hungry as you were once.
Talk for yourself. I'm getting older and wilder.
But you're so much younger, you know, so...
No, you never know.
You never know. Yeah, I know.
That's the interesting future. You won't know anymore. The demographic will change. You cannot, define people by age anymore, as far as I'm concerned.
But diversity is both age and culture and background and experience, low level, high level. I mean, it's everything.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to say, but the quota is very often like a gender thing. It's because it's between women and men. And then we all call it diversity.
Right.
Because it's, yeah.
But
diversity is, of course, the competence that women are bringing on board also. Because when I talked about tradition, it means that women are also bringing on other values and another set, another angle of seeing things, which will add to a complete board.
As well as different nationalities would do.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, I think that Connie has made a mark in this conference, because here we have another question. In the private equity industry, it's common that both directors and the management are partners in the company in order to create the same engagement for the company, since everybody are in the same situation or in the same boat. Could you apply this model on public companies?
Probably you, Bente.
Yeah, somehow I think that ownership and engagement and what you want to do, where you want to bring the company, that you're more committed. That if you're also an owner, so that's the reason why I meant that I like to invite, the employees also to be owners of a company. We have had some investigations years ago where we saw that companies where also the employees were invited to be on the shareholder side, they tend to do better results than companies that didn't. So, and the same applied then to management and board of directors, I think. The commitment will be stronger because you have your own money in it.
Yeah, I think, but I think it is very important to play the different roles, though. I come from a professional services firm, and we're not public, but so we are owners, we are board members, and we are employees at the same time. And I've also been on the global board for Pricewaterhouse Coopers now for 8 years, and it is a specific situation to have that under the same roof, so to say. But you really need to have processes in place so you play your role. And in our firm, when we try to describe this, we describe the board as a critical friend to management. That's one way of putting it, that we are sort of a little bit closer to each other, but the importance of the role is still there.
Do you see any negative effects of it?
Sorry?
Do you see any negative effects of it?
Yeah, you know, we have discussed both on a global level and a national level to have external board members, for instance. It has been tried now and then. But it is very difficult, unfortunately, I would say, to get full acceptance for other profiles, so to say, in such an organization. But I think that we should develop that, and I think that would be very valuable. We have systems with advisory boards, and that's one way of dealing with a lot of what we are describing here as well. Yeah. Also when it comes to diversity, actually.
But I think one of the secrets behind the success of the private equity model is alignment of interest and the clear division of responsibilities between the ownership role, the role of the board, and the role of the management, and to have ownership in the way that it's structured there doesn't mess up the roles at all. I think you live in an environment where that is more difficult to hold those roles apart, but you have the same interest and you have the same sense of urgency. And it's easier to align when you have a skin in the game. And I mean, in the public boards I have participated, there has never been a request or part of the deal to actually invest in the company. But in all private equity situations, this has been part of the of actually accepting to become a board member, also to believe enough in the strategy, in the company, in the future, so you are willing to put some of your own money into it.
Yeah, it's a two-way commitment.
Yeah.
We'll probably see more of that in the future, though, in public companies. Any more comments? Okay, so we thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our part 2 of the agenda, taking advantage of the Nordic corporate governance model. And it's time for our keynote speech. Please welcome Sofia Keretchen, Senior Policy Officer at the Corporate Governance Unit of the EU Commission, DG Internal Market. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for this introduction. I'm extremely happy to be here. I have to say that it's an extremely interesting conference, and I'm very happy to be able to present to you the EU perspective on these issues. Like this, sure. Now, I have been asked to present to you how EU initiatives can help to improve the competitiveness of EU companies and of Nordic companies more specifically. Now, this is an extremely vast subject, obviously, and then I cannot possibly cover everything that we do in the EU to improve the competitiveness of our companies. So my presentation will concentrate basically on the corporate governance matters, but corporate governance reform is actually very high on the agenda of the European Commission today. Now, why to improve corporate governance? Why is it so important? For two reasons, basically. The first reason is the financial crisis. The financial crisis has revealed that there have been many corporate governance weaknesses in banks, many of which are present also in listed companies more broadly, and which can only be addressed in a horizontal way, by a horizontal approach. You know that we have introduced already many reforms, corporate governance reforms, in banks. Now we are broadening our scope, and we will cover listed companies more broadly. The second reason is because we are in the middle of an economic recession, and we must come out of the recession stronger, and we all know that the company is the main source of genuine economic value creation, and corporate governance plays an extremely important role. It helps, good governance helps to improve the efficiency and competitiveness of companies. The European Commission has recently adopted an action plan on the long-term financing of the EU economy. This action plan has many objectives. Two of these objectives are first, to improve the regulatory environment for companies so that they can be governed in a way that they can focus on their long-term success and on their long-term sustainability. The second objective of this action plan is to liberate long-term financing for EU companies. We all know that we need more long-term financing for long-term investment needs in order to improve our competitiveness. We have recently adopted or proposed a directive on the encouragement of long-term shareholder engagement, and this proposal will respond to both of these objectives. Now, let me stress that we don't believe that regulation alone will improve governance. Is all your responsibility and the responsibility of shareholders. So we think that all the actions also of AcadeMedia and what have been described today here will very much complement this corporate governance reform. Now, what do we propose concretely in the recently adopted directive on shareholder engagement and other recent directives? First point, responsible investment. In this directive, we want to incentivize institutional investors and their asset managers to be more long-term oriented and more responsible investors. Our 10,000 listed companies have a very solid basis for economic growth. Citizens, future pensioners who invest for 10, 20, 30 years to have a return in the long term. This is, of course, a huge resource. Insurance companies and pension funds together have invested more than 4 trillion euros in equities in Europe. This represents 57% of the market capitalization of EU listed companies, so it's a huge resource. This makes institutional investors and asset managers a major force of our capital markets. However, studies show that institutional investors and asset managers do not engage enough with their companies, with the listed companies, and they don't often have a responsible ownership attitude. Now, this had or contributed to the development of the financial crisis, but it also has an effect more broadly on listed companies in general. One study, for example, from the Nordic region, from the Oslo Stock Exchange listed companies, shows that institutional investor ownership has a negative effect on firm value because such owners are poor monitors. Now, although the end beneficiaries of institutional investors are interested in long-term performance, institutional investors and asset managers' investment strategies exhibit a much shorter focus. Today, the average holding period of shares by so-called active buy and hold strategy institutional investors and asset managers is around 1 year. So this number actually excludes the short-term strategies, hedge fund strategies or high-frequency trading strategies. Now, the main cause for this lies in inappropriate incentives within the investment chain between the institutional investor and the asset managers. In most of the cases, the funds of the institutional investors are being managed by asset managers, and the performance of the asset manager is being evaluated on a quarterly basis with reference to capital market indexes in most of the cases. So asset managers are actually being incentivized to outperform each other on a quarterly basis with reference to capital market indexes. This is something that shifts the horizon of the investment. Now it's clear that in such a scenario, the interest of looking into the real value and the long-term potential of companies, engaging with them to improve their governance and performance and generate long-term return is lost in the chain, basically. So this new directive on shareholder engagement will put disclosure obligations on the institutional investors and asset managers, which will increase their accountability to act in the best long-term interest of their beneficiaries and the investee company and to be more responsible owners. Now, what are the main benefits of this approach? Studies show that more engagement leads to better performing and more efficient companies. So this is one of the major benefits. Another potentially huge benefit is that a better focus on the fundamental value and the real value creative capacity of companies as opposed to short-term market movements, is likely to channel funds to a wider spectrum of companies, including smaller ones which today suffer from inappropriate financing. And last but not least, a longer-term perspective obviously acts in a counter-cyclical manner and promotes financial stability. So this is about shareholder engagement, more responsible investment. The second issue that I wanted to raise is basically sustainability. We have spoken at length about this today. Reporting on non-financial performance. As you may be aware, a recent Commission proposal was just adopted on the disclosure of non-financial information, which requires certain big companies to develop a policy to manage sustainability risk and disclose how these policies have been implemented. Effective management of long-term risks is likely to significantly contribute to the competitiveness of EU companies. This has been said many times this morning. Now, the new directive on shareholders' rights will actually incentivize the institutional investor to look better into these non-financial and sustainability disclosures that companies will disclose in the future. Another issue, board diversity. I really don't want to go into this because we have spoken about this at length. Again, in the proposal which was just adopted on non-financial information, we also promote more diversified board. Again, our approach is diversity from many perspectives, not only gender, but financial background, geographical background, etc. So we also promote this. One issue that has not been mentioned, better link between pay and performance, directors' pay and performance. The Shareholders' Rights Directive, the new one, contains measures, basically a shareholder's say on pay rule, which is likely to create a better link between the remuneration of directors and the performance of the company. Actually, we always use the Swedish example where you have already such a rule in place that it has really had a real impact, because in in Sweden, you can say that before the adoption of this binding say on pay rule, there was no correlation between pay and performance, and now there is a correlation. So we think that this measure will also, if not in Sweden, but in other member states, will contribute to better companies and more competitive companies. And lastly, very briefly, minority shareholder protection. The new Shareholders' Rights Directive will contain a rule on the approval of major related party transactions. We think that this is an extremely important minority protection rule, and we believe, again, that minority protection, this has also been mentioned already today, is an extremely important element of good corporate governance, so we will promote minority protection in this new directive. I will stop here and very much looking forward to any observations or comments. Thank you.
Shareholder directives, that was a walk in the park. I will try, Sophia, I will try to do my best. But I think I need some help, so I welcome up Hans Dahlborg, who is past chair of the Swedish Corporate Governance Board and honorary chairman of Nordea, as well as Anna-Clara Ekenstam, chair of the Nordic Federation of Public Accounts. Welcome very much. Okay, what do you say about how does EU's legislation implicate the Nordic corporate governance? Any comments on Sophia's?
Well, there were so many aspects of this, but if you take the last one, does the EU regulation create problems? I would say yes to us. It's EU has accepted the Anglo-American way of corporate governance, and to a big surprise to me, as a matter of fact. And in that world, there is a big mixture between board, non-executive and executive board members. So now EU is trying to find out how to loosen up that mixture and try to get some form of clarity by rules on dependence and independence. That is not relevant in our market, because we have a pretty clear chain of command where we have the general meeting that appoints the board appoints the CEO, and the general meeting also appoints the auditors, and the general meeting is holding the board accountable, as well as the board is having the CEO accountable. So the EU solution, I would say, is creating to us a bad solution, or allows a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, if I would put it that way.
Can we let Sophia in and comment on what she's hearing from you? Would you like to comment on this?
I'm not sure I fully understand at this stage why we are proposing a solution.
You're working on trying to get more clarity in the Anglo-American way of management and the board, where we have in Sweden and in Nordic countries a very clear-cut chain of command and hierarchical way of operating.
I think you could say that it's very. I think it's very good that the Commission shows such a high interest in corporate governance, in particular within what we have spent the full morning talking about, the changes that companies are facing and board of directors in the expectations on what should be performed. But what is surprising is the level of details that the Commission actually is working on when regulations. As if we look at corporate governance within the European Union, it's really a patchwork of different corporate governance rules. So what could be good in one country for regulation might be very bad in another one. So that is really what I think is surprising.
I couldn't agree more. I mean,
we have to let Sophia in and comment on this.
But I could have another attack before.
But you can wait with that attack. Take them one by one.
Okay. Yes, so I have to fundamentally disagree with this, because the main body of EU corporate governance rules is in recommendations. Commission recommendations, basically. These recommendations apply on a comply or explain basis. This is how we regulate in the area of corporate governance. Now, it's true that that is a directive that we have proposed today. But if you look into or what is exactly the content of this directive, it will deal with responsible investment, and it will put a lot of transparency obligations. It's true, it's a long list of things that we will require institutional investors and asset managers to disclose. But this will not affect the company. It will affect the institutional investors and asset manager community. We think it's an extremely important thing to create more accountability in the investment chain in order to incentivize more and more responsible shareholder engagement. This is an extremely important thing. What we propose for companies, again, but also part of this will apply on a comply or explain basis. What we propose for companies, for example, on remuneration, you already have it in law, because you think that it's an extremely important thing. You also have the related party transaction rule in law, because you yourself think that it's an extremely important thing. We will extend these rules, for example, remuneration, because we have tried to make change with 2 recommendations before. We had 2 on this, and none of them were success stories. So I really don't think that we just regulate without looking into the different corporate governance model. We put detailed regulations, and it does not fit at all.
But is there any value in Anna Clara's critics here that there are so many detailed rules that not may apply to all the countries within EU? Can hurt one country and help another?
I'm not aware of any such rules, really. I'm not aware of anything. I don't really understand your point either, because it's very much the same system in all the corporate governance model. The shareholders appoint the board appoint the executive management. It's exactly the same in the UK model. It's exactly the same in the so-called German model. So it's true that shareholders are better represented in the board in the Nordic model, but in terms of appointment, it's
so it's time for attack number 2.
I don't disagree with the ambition to have responsible shareholders. The owners should take more responsibility in all companies. But what I'm saying is that I think very much of that is already inbuilt in the Nordic system. In this country, we consider ownership rights being extremely important, and they are also a part of the European Convention. In the UK, if I'm stretching it a little far, in the UK, and the owners take responsibility for what they own. But I would say in the UK, they look upon shareholders more as investors than as they were owners with the responsibility to take care of the companies. And if you create a rule to correct that situation and apply that in the Nordic countries, we get confused. You say it's a recommendation. You are in a country where people are extremely obedient to everything that
No, but again, I don't think that incentivizing more responsible investment from the institutional investor side would not fit at all with your system. You see.
May I compliment a little more, saying that, as Anna Clara is saying, if you want to have a directive that is principled by its nature, it has to be very general. And then you have to say good board should be good or something like that. But
why have it?
But if you really want to have a detailed directive, which it is, then you have to establish also 28 different exceptions, because, as Anna is saying, it's a patchwork of different corporate governance systems. So that's where we sit and have the problem.
And really, you are going down.
No, it's not me.
And there are some details in there where you actually define what should the audit committee do in a board and what should the board do. That is going quite deep into the company, which might not necessarily fit every board and every audit committee. And from an auditor perspective, the changes that you are making with the assignment of the auditor, to me, it's a bit of a lack of insight into what it takes to be an auditor of a huge company. You want to have a change every 10 years. And you also want the auditors to be more detailed in knowledge of the business and the controls and the accounting principles of the company. For a large company, that takes a number of years to acquire, and it's a huge investment for the auditor when you have a change, and also for the company. It will cost enormous amount of resources to gain that knowledge. So actually, by implying that we have to change auditors more often, you will lose knowledge on the auditor side. And in some countries, looking at the audit company structure, I actually think that instead of having more audit firms available to audit, you will actually lose the competence and you will have less audit firms. So it's really kind of a distrust also to the board of directors. From my experience, I know that the board of directors really want knowledgeable auditors that challenge them when needed. And to be able to do that, it takes a lot of experience from the auditor side, and you need strong and healthy audit firms that can manage that task, and that's also good for the society as a whole, and that's the expectations from the society as a whole.
Sophia, comment on that?
Yes, I know about this concern. I'm not directly involved in
no, I know
the regulation of audit of the audit area, but yes, I have two comments. As far as I know, you had one concern that the nomination committee should be better involved in appointing the auditor. My colleagues told me that this has been solved basically in the final version of the auditing directive, or I don't know, it's in the regulation. Now, the second issue, the rotation of the auditors, this is this has a certain purpose, as far as I know. The objective here is to enlarge a bit, as you also said, the big four companies, not to have only the same auditors all the time auditing the same company. So this is a different policy objective. Now, of course, there are pros and cons of such a rule. It has been adopted by a compromise by the EU legislator, so this rule will have to apply. But I don't think it's something which relates specifically to the Nordic corporate governance model, right? It's more about the auditor industry.
We have a question from the audience.
Yes, the audience are getting on and starting to have opinions here. First of all, there's one saying here, the AGM is fully sovereign here, contrary to the situation Anglo-America. That is a fundamental difference. And then there's another comment here. Our EU representative do not seem to understand the differences in governance models in different EU countries. Another thing, are you aware that more than 80% of share trading is done by computer models? How to regulate those investors?
Poor girl.
Okay, Sophia, here we go. We have 5.5 minutes.
Now, again, the general meeting is sovereign in one model and it's not sovereign in another model. I don't understand. I don't know who asked the question. Maybe I could get more clarity to be able to answer.
So whoever wrote that comment, if you'd like to please clarify. Yes. There we have the person writing it. So.
Well, it was really in support of Hans Dahlberg's initial comment that in the Anglo-Saxon model, there are frequently limitations on what issues can be raised by the shareholders and in what format and so on. Whereas in our model, the shareholders are fully sovereign to raise any issue, and the board of directors has to respond and deal with that. And that's part of why the ownership involvement is so much stronger here than it tends to be in the Anglo-Saxon model. And that was just a comment to reinforce what Hans Öberg said in his outset.
No, but again, I mean, it's a very good thing. Your model is a very good one, that you have strong owners, long-term oriented owners who ask good questions, stupid questions, whatever, good questions. This is a system that we would like to see also in other countries. And again, I don't think that you have anything to fear from more responsible investors. We think it will be beneficial also in your system. And actually, we have studies which show, I mentioned the study on the companies listed on the Oslo Stock Exchange, that there are studies which show that institutional investor ownership has a negative effect on the long term on company value because they are poor monitors. There is a problem also here. Institutional investors, asset managers behave in the same way because they are incentivized in the same way all over Europe. It's not an Anglo-Saxon thing that the asset managers are short-termist. They are short-termist in other countries as well, and so we don't see any contradiction between what we are doing and what is the Swedish corporate governance model.
But do you use the Nordic corporate governance model within the EU? Are you familiar with how it's structured and working? Do you use it as a role model, so you can actually stipulate the rules based on our governance model?
Yes, and again, our rules are based, this directive, for example, is based on 3 huge consultations. We had started to work on this in 2008 after the financial crisis. We had 3 large consultations, first on corporate governance in financial institutions, corporate governance in listed companies, then the big consultation on the long-term financing communication. We have collected all the views, what we should do, what are the problems, how is the system working. It's impossible not to...
Yes. Well, no, go on.
So it's, of course, we are collecting information from everywhere. It's not that we come up with rules from the top of our head. But it's also, I would encourage you also to contribute to this consultation, so that if you see any specific problem, like for example this auditor issue, so that we are aware in advance before we propose to be able to address the issue.
But in that question,
I think everything in what we are talking, it boils down to our doubt about regulated self-regulation, which you think is a contradictory in word. It's in my book, and I'm not going to be, it's not to be funny, a good board is good for the company. And then we get then recommendation that we should have diversity, and we should report on diversity if possible. What is diversity? I mean, I trust much more the market than I trust the regulators, to be honest. And I listened to the first speaker this morning. He said, we need skeptics, we need entrepreneurs, we need energetic people, we need entrepreneurial people. Yes, there is a risk for homogeneous thinking, but he gave 4 examples of people that should be on a board. But I'm not so sure that would follow domestic or foreign members, or young or old, or vegetarians and beef eaters. I mean, it's to find out this differentiation, to get a dynamic discussion in the board, cannot be reported according to the lines coming from the regulators. And I don't think we cannot regulate wealth to get welfare. Welfare is coming out of entrepreneurial spirit and hard work, I would say.
Anna-Clara.
Well, I just wanted to comment on that. You specifically mentioned the audit policy, and that we should have explained before, I think you have never had so many responses on a green paper as you had on the audit policy. And I think most of those were quite critical. So from that perspective, I don't think it's right to say that we haven't agreed. But it's also important, I think, that you cannot regulate ethics and good behavior. And I also think it's really going into the detail when you say that in a financial institution you cannot have a board member that have more than 3 assignments. That is strange. And also have a government actually saying, okay, this is a good board composition. What happens when that board fails? Should we then blame the government because they have said okay to this board composition? So that is details that is difficult to understand, and where actually government and politician takes away responsibility from the owners.
Mm-hmm. Now, I agree with this one. So, for banking, it's true that we have introduced strict rules because there have been so many corporate governance weaknesses which went really to the fundamental role of, for example, the functioning of the board. What we have found in banks that the board were really weak in criticizing what was going on at the management level. There was not enough knowledge. And one of the issues that have been mentioned systematically is that board members had many other assignments. It was simply impossible for them to follow.
Have you experienced this within the Nordic countries? What you're saying now? Is this experiences from the Nordic countries?
I cannot, again, this is something that I have not been directly involved. It would have been good to have this question beforehand so that I can prepare this. I don't know whether we had any specific examples from the Nordic countries.
Because I'm thinking about Anna Clara's initial comment that some rules and regulations are applicable to some countries, but not all 28 of them.
No, these rules will be applicable to all the countries.
As I am a banker, can I tell, when I was CEO for 10 years, what is Nordea today, I did say no to every appointment on the board because I was working 24 hours every day for Nordea in those days. Then I became the chairman. And that's a totally different ballgame. So those who are not CEOs, they have a totally different situation. In the meantime, when I was the chairman of the bank, I was also for 10 years the chairman of Uppsala University. I was 9 years chairman of the opera. They will not be included in this calculation, but they took a lot of time and a lot of thinking, I can tell you. So it's the rules are absolutely, they're not working. To put it that way.
We have to go further in the program, and we actually have an interactive question for the audience. So we'll have a small break with you, and you will answer the question: have you been helped or hurt by EU regulation in your board work? And of course, there are several EU directives coming in the future. You may not have that much experience yet, so you have to anticipate the future rather than sharing your experiences of today. Okay, the answer is coming up. This question does not apply to me. That was 60%, probably because we have not had so much experience yet. 29%. Heart 7.7 help so far. So we measure this in a couple of years and see what the outcome will be. Would you like to have a short comment on either this or to finalize this panel discussion? This could go on for several days, probably.
Hurt 24 helped 7. Yes, what is strange for me is that I have the impression that Sweden has implemented very well many of the EU recommendations, for example. We think that all of our corporate governance recommendations are common sense, really. And this is a country, in the Nordic countries, there is a lot of sympathy with these rules, actually. And I don't know whether people actually know that these rules come from the EU, or they do it because they feel that it's the right way of doing it, or they see that the EU actually tries to incentivize behavior according to these rules. So I have a bit the impression that we try to push the other member states to converge a bit towards a good model, which is yours, and I don't think that we have hurt by any of our rules. Now, of course, this audit issue has been mentioned, but I really don't see which rules could have.
Anna-Clara and Hans, that's good news, right? The Nordic model is a good model.
I'm a strong believer in the open Europe as a peace project, as a big open market, but I don't think that all the rules coming out of Brussels are meeting a demand somewhere out in the member states. I have absolutely no impression of that, on the contrary. So I would say regulate less, and you will get more trust and support for what's happening. As the English are saying, don't try to teach a pig to sing. It wastes your time and it annoys the pig.
Anna-Clara, you have any final wordings?
Well, I think that some of the initiatives taken on by the EU Commission, of course, are good, and I think that they would represent what we think is good practice in corporate governance. But it's a huge difference between regulating and having self-regulation.
Yes.
And in the Nordic countries, we have a very long and good history with self-regulation, and it's very easy to impose a regulation, but it's much more different to remove it. And at this point in time, there are so many changes and the pace is going so much faster than before. So I think it's vital that we have these discussions, and I think it's good that the Commission initiates the debate and hence is a driver for change. But I think you should be very restrictive with regulation. Try to initiate change, but not that way.
That will be the final words for this panel today. Thank you so much for coming here. Sophia, you may stay on stage. Yes. The Swedish Academy of Board Directors are presenting their call for action. So please welcome back on stage the gentleman from this morning, Lars-Erik, Jorma Eloranta, and Jakob Stengel, partner of the Danish Board Network. Welcome up. Lars-Erik,
Thank you.
Could you please tell us what this...
I think it's fair to say that there are worries in the Nordic countries regarding the risk that our corporate governance model, the principles of that model, can be violated or changed somehow because of the eagerness of the legislators in EU. I noticed that several times, and I realized it last year when we were looking into the auditing directive. I'm sorry, my voice is not the best today. when we looked into that directive, the first version, we realized that that version was turning our chain of command upside down regarding the appointment of the auditors. We, and with the help of others, managed to save the situation, so it was changed. But this was an example, I would say, a new example of how you in EU tend to look more upon the Anglo-American corporate governance model and the Central European corporate governance model. It's not a critique, but I guess it's quite natural that it is like this. But that's why we are so eager today to remind you and our legislators that there is a Nordic model. And in fact, we will have a study, not we, but the Center for Business and Policy Studies in Sweden will have a study. It already started, and it's led by Per Lekvall, who is here somewhere there, where leading policy makers, researchers, experts and business people from the major Nordic countries will look into how the Nordic model works. The aim of this study is to present to an international audience a coherent description of the common features of the corporate governance systems of the 4 major Nordic countries. And a particularly important target group is policymakers and regulators within the EU administration, where we believe that the specific nature of the Nordic governance framework is not generally well understood. The results of this study will be published by the end of this year, or maybe the beginning of next year. But this shows that not only we are worried for the future of the Nordic corporate governance model, but also the business society in the 4 Nordic countries. This said, we would like to already now, before the results of this study is published, we would like to call upon the Nordic representatives of the European Parliament and the European Council to respect the fundamental principles of the Nordic corporate governance model. As you know, it's based on a strict division of powers, duties and responsibilities between the shareholders, the board of directors and the executive management. And these principles are fundamental to us. This is what our corporate governance model builds on. And this model has served our Nordic societies well during decades. And we believe it has the capacity to do so even in the future. So we therefore ask you, Swedish legislators and legislators from EU and legislators from other Nordic countries to respect the fundamental principles upon which the Nordic corporate governance model is based. And the reasons you find above me on the picture above me. I will not go into detail. But these are the basic reasons why we ask you, legislators, to be careful of our Nordic corporate governance model.
So maybe we should ask them up on stage. I would like to have the response from representatives from the EU Council, the EU Parliament and the EU Commission. Please welcome Cecilia Wikström, EU parliamentarian and member of the Jury Committee, Sirpa Pietikäinen, EU parliamentarian and vice chair of the IMCO Committee, also member of the Econ Committee, Johan Danelius, head of division for real estate law and company law at the Swedish Ministry of Justice. And Sofia, we already know. Welcome.
Thank you.
And now you will be handed.
You want to say something?
Yeah, well, in Finland we would say that if it's not broken, don't fix it.
There you go.
And now you are handed the Nordic call for action, signed and sealed.
No, for you.
But, of course, these representatives have had the chance to read this paper in advance. And having read it, I'm curious, what are your comments on this Nordic call for action? Cecilia, why don't you start?
Thank you very much. A very good point of departure is always to go back to the roots. And when we're discussing corporate governance, we must also realize that it's not only on corporate governance as such that there would be differences between Central Europe and the Nordic countries. We must find the whole legal tradition completely different in a country like Sweden or Norway and Germany and Great Britain. I mean, we need to face this. And now when we are trying to talk about the regulation or directives, regulations that we are trying to put in place together between the three institutions, when the Commission is presenting a proposal, this is not the end of the day. It's not the final result. It's a proposal and must be considered a proposal, and the co-legislators, namely us, the European Parliament, and the Member States, are obliged to find and define a common position and to take that as a point of departure for negotiations, trilogue negotiations. And you mentioned the audit reform. Well, self-regulation is, of course, to prefer, I must say. I was deeply involved in that case, not as a rapporteur, not even as a co-rapporteur or shadow rapporteur, but since I'm leading the liberal team in the Legal Affairs Committee, I had to supervise the whole process of negotiations. And the result was not the same as the proposal. We needed to find compromises on rotation, on everything that the Commission had proposed. And I think that we are so often criticized for the Commission proposal, but not for the final result.
So how will these directives and regulation affect the governance of Nordic corporate?
Take into consideration what I just mentioned, the different legal traditions. Now, in 2009, I was told that it was actually the first time ever that a member of the European Parliament from Sweden or Finland or Denmark, I think also, was elected coordinator. And to be a coordinator in a committee in the European Parliament, in this case in the Legal Affairs Committee, you are setting the rules and trying to present your ideas for the whole mandate for the coming 5 years.
So it won't affect us.
So, but if we as Nordic countries would have reached out on an earlier stage to the different committees and presented an alternative tradition or point, then it would have been easier. What I'm trying to say is that we should enhance and underline the importance of a vital dialogue, and for the Nordic countries to participate and to send representatives for the hearings, for the different meetings that you're invited to. This has, throughout the decades, not been the case.
So it's too late?
It's not at all too late, but try to be aware, and try also, when it comes to the audit package. I was surprised when I found out that even in this country, the auditors that I reached out to and that I met for instance, they had the impression that the Commission proposal was the outcome. And then, when the rapporteur then made his proposal, which was completely on the opposite line, then, okay, now this is the outcome. At the end, the outcome is not finalized until the trilogue negotiations has been taken place, and that is a long process.
I didn't get the answer to Bella's question. I'm confused as to how did I still confused. What's the answer to Bella's very straight question? There is no answer. There is no answer to it.
There isn't an answer to it. Take it. Well, listen. In the European Union, we are 28 countries, 510 million citizens. Sweden is 2%. 2%. Who are we to take the lead and tell everybody else to follow our example? Sometimes we have a lot. Sometimes we have a lot to give, but we have even more to learn. But what we always should do is to engage in a dialogue, in a debate, and give the best examples.
What is your comments on this Nordic call for action?
Well, the Nordic call for action is a good one, and I was especially interested in the first point. Well, because ownership to me is something that ensures engagement. This is also why I personally was completely against the quota, the gender quota proposal by the Commission, because I do believe that we should ensure influence by strong ownership. To me, this is essential. But it wasn't easy being a member of the European Parliament at that time. I was heavily criticized as being a dinosaur from the north.
Maybe we should let Sirpa or Daniel into this. What are your comments on this Nordic call for action, this paper?
Yes, thank you. First of all, congratulations. It's easy to say I could add my name on the call of action as well. But of course, I'm a bit biased, being a Nordic myself and being active in company boards as well. So I can sympathize very much this approach, and I can commit myself very much, as I guess Cecilia can as well, to work for these goals. And then there's the famous but. And the famous but is that EU is a bit of a tough effort. That means it's not so easy to find a common ground. And the further we are in our legal traditions, in our company traditions, or political traditions, either you don't do anything, or then you try to find some common ground and you try to negotiate it. It's a lengthier process. And then do we get it always right? No, we don't. Do we get it functional? More or less often. Do we have a review process of a legislation to get it better in the future? Yes, we do. And this is something I would like to encourage you to engage us as politicians by the countrymen and from the other perspectives, and on the European level too. We are reviewing our legislation, and I remember the fights when it comes to Transparency Directive, when it comes to Accounting Directive and Audit Directive. I was following very closely. We get it in better shape, as Cecilia said, in the Parliament. Not perfect. And our traditions are very different, as we say. And of course, weightier countries and weightier businesses tend to have, they say, might have a bit of more to say than what we do. But that doesn't prevent us on pushing forward our good models. But we need help there too. And if we have a strong business community and professionals community, as we do, being even more vocal on supporting the ideas and pushing them forward as a methods also in pan-European level. Not because they are Nordic, no one would buy that, but because they are good. Then we might gradually, step by step, succeed in this process, and that, Julie, I do hope.
You do not sound that optimistic, though, hearing you.
You know, I do have
describing the work within the EU.
Yeah, no, but you know, I do have a problem. I don't know if you have the same. I can't always have my way with my husband. Bad thing. I have to make compromises. I have to listen.
Or you divorce.
What? The divorce? And I have the same dilemma with the EU. I can either divorce, or then I have to make compromises.
Johan.
Sorry, Johan.
Okay.
Any comments?
Yes, not being a politician myself, I'm here today as a representative of the government, Swedish Ministry of Justice. I think it's easy to say that the core values and the main elements of this call for action is very much in line with the position of the Swedish government and what we're trying to promote in EU negotiations. So it's easy to sign up on this on a principle level. I think it's important for us to think of how we can be constructive in this process. It's like many have said here, Sweden is a small country, and we are part of the EU. We have to be loyal to that democratic process which the EU legislation is part of. So just saying no, we want to do things our own way here is not the way to work as we see it. So we need to be constructive, and we need to have more of fact-based good examples to describe and to explain to other countries, to the Commission, to explain why we think that the models that we apply here are successful, and we need to be very concrete, I think, in terms of pointing out what parts of proposals from the Commissions are we not pleased with, and why are we not pleased with them, and to also be very diligent when making priorities. We cannot win all races in Brussels. We need to focus on issues that are the most important to us, and I think we need to work very closely between policymakers, government and the business industry. We need the input from practitioners and from people who work with this on a daily basis, and I think we can do more in that sense to work together.
And this is one initiative.
Yes.
I want to let in Lars-Erik. Oh, sorry, Jorma.
Just the fundamental issue in my opinion is I tried to listen Sophia's presentation very carefully, and her presentation was about the increasing competitiveness in European Union, and I didn't find elements that adopting those rules in Nordic countries would increase the competitiveness of the Nordic. Competitiveness that Nordic countries would be more attractive for investment, more attractive for locating businesses in these countries. Creating jobs, creating employment, creating economic growth in the Nordic countries. On the contrary, I saw, and Hans Dahlborg was pointing out many of those elements, on the contrary, they decrease the competitiveness of the Nordic countries. And we are talking about a serious issue. It's not the blame or game between Parliament or European Union Commission or so. It is individuals and people who don't get work in Nordic countries because of the lousy government that the European Union is now going to establish in these countries, which have a reasonably good functioning corporate governance. This is all about it. We are protecting the possibilities to have companies operating well in Nordic area, and hope we find a solution also to that issue.
Would you like to comment on that?
Well, it's all about fostering growth and prosperity, believe it or not. This is the core issue. In a time where we have faced the worst economical crisis since the 1930s, we need to ensure that we foster growth and prosperity in every field. So this is something that you need to take for granted, that this is the full intention.
And Jorma is fixing it.
Oh, well, I'm happy that you are trying. We are all trying.
Yes, please.
Well, if I might just add a comment. I think it's important to remember that today's excellence will be the standard of tomorrow. And I don't think that we necessarily appreciate where we come from. The Nordic countries actually have ascended to a higher level of sustainability than most other countries. I think that most compliance regulation is put in place to offset yesterday's wrongdoing by other business leaders somewhere else. But I think that the Nordic, not only the governance model, but the leadership model in itself, beholds some significant criteria that a lot of other countries envy us. And I think we should remember that. So my urge to all regulators would be to try to focus on what would actually add value for companies in the future, rather than just offsetting the wrongdoings that was done yesterday and the years before.
Sophia, would you like to comment on that?
Just one very brief comment on what is in the proposal and how will this increase the competitiveness. Actually, what we try to do regarding institutional investors, for example, is to incentivize them to look better into the real value of the companies. I said into the disclosure on sustainability, such things. How, if the Swedish model is good, if corporate governance is extremely robust in Sweden, how would this not be beneficial for Sweden? That institutional investors, instead of blindly investing into capital market indexes, would look better into how is the company governed, what is the real value of the company. We don't see any contradiction. We think it will be very, very good for Sweden, this rule, for example. The other two rules that I mentioned, say on pay is already in Swedish law, related party transaction is already in Swedish law. It's not obvious at all for us why we are decreasing the competitiveness of Swedish companies with these measures.
So, to conclude, could you say that are your opinion that the actions emanating from Brussels will help the Nordic companies to be competitive? Could you stand up and stand for that today here? Sirpa?
Yes, I think that they can be. It's very hard to do it when you are working at the state-of-the-art situation. But when you're actually looking from forecasting to backcasting on 2050 and what are the challenges, and I duly think that we have very good capabilities here in Nordic to meet those challenges, then we should be looking forward what kind of a regulation we need to support that. So actually, on my opinion, the regulation is not good or bad. You can kill with the knife or you can cut the bread. The question is what kind of a regulation you have in place. You can regulate the same thing in very many various ways. And one thing I would put a lot of focus is on this integrated reporting. Did we get it right this time? No, we did not. Because if you do regulate, you don't need to regulate that you can have a voluntary action. Because you can have a voluntary action without regulation either. And if you don't even set the standard what kind of a regulatory framework you are going to use, think of if you would have accounting and everybody would do their accounting on different rule book. What is the comparability? So actually we have a regulation that doesn't lead you anywhere. But this is the furthest what we cut at the point. But this is the reason why I mentioned that we have to be looking forward. Okay, what kind of integrated reporting really would enhance long-term investments and favor good companies, forward-looking companies? What kind of a reporting system, what kind of indicators one would need to, and let's push for binding, very simple, duly integrated, standardized reporting on this field. And I think that we have a lot of competencies in different fields, and we should be start to be active now, because then after 5 years, when we sort of revisit the thing, we should already have gained the broader support for this kind of approach.
Thank you. Cecilia, comment?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What we need to always take into consideration is what is the European added value on this piece of legislation that is now proposed. And coming back to my first intervention on gender equality and that proposal, there I could see very little of added European value, actually. But if you want really to do something on gender equality or then you should really do it on a national level, because the cultural traditions, the history are so different in the various European member states. And also it's about credibility. It's about credibility, because who are we to point at free companies? This is what you need to do. We, the European Union and our institutions, where the European Parliament consists of 70% men, 30% women, the Commission 19 men and 8 women, when the proposal was released, and the member states in council, well, you see the ministers, well, there are pictures where there is not even one woman in the family photo after a meeting among
and you
the
are
ministers.
against the quota law.
So, well, if take it this way, in Sweden, we managed, when it comes to state-owned companies, very well. Look at that. It's 40% today. But take a look at the companies owned by municipalities. When it comes to concrete, tractors, buildings, cranes, look at those companies. They are all men, all with small exceptions. So if you really want to make a difference, you should do it on a national level and not on a European level, because the European added value on this is you really need to question it.
So that's how you're going to deal with these corporate governance legislations as well?
Well, what we need to do when it comes to it is always to really analyze what is the European added value. And how can we reach the incentive? How can we reach the final goal, growth and prosperity and increased competitiveness? And doing that, I think what we can do always is to share best practices between the member states. And you don't need to regulate that.
Yes, Cecilia, you were right when you said that we are only 2% of the population of EU. But together, we 3 Nordic countries are, well, more. I don't know how many percent. More. And together, if we join forces, I think we can be of great support to the Nordic representatives in the Parliament, and also a strong lobbying force on a Nordic basis or inside, together with ECODA, our European organization, to influence the Commission and the members of Parliament down in Brussels. But we need to be there. We can't just sit up here in Sweden, Finland and Denmark and hope for the best. We have to be there, talk with the politicians, talk with the civil servants in Brussels. Otherwise, anything can happen, almost.
We have
and therefore,
2 more minutes.
That's the reason why the Swedish Academy of Boards, the Institute of Directors in Finland and in Denmark has decided to become members of ECODA. So we really have a good platform where we can discuss these matters in the future. And for Sweden, we only been there for 2.5 years now, but we have invested a lot of time and resources together with the help of the Swedish board Corporate Governance Board. Thank you, Hans. We will be able to have a good representation in Ecuador and in Brussels, and so our voice can be heard in the future. And that's necessary if we are going to defend, together with our friends in Denmark and Finland, if we are going to defend the principles of the Nordic corporate governance model.
So we have 1.5 minutes. It's a tough job for you, representatives from you, but I have a question for you. Today you received this paper, what they call for action. It's a piece of paper. What will you do with that piece of paper?
I will store it on myself. But seriously...
will you agitate?
Yes.
Coming back to your offices?
Seriously, of course, I will take it into account. Probably, I hope I would be following the same committees I've done on the previous legislative period. And then when we do have, for example, financial services networks and other networks where we are dealing among different MEPs and interest groups, it's a good part to start raising this point and start this kind of a lobbying and creating a broader support for this approach then when the legislation comes up front on the table.
Sophia?
I would say that I will bring it home and distribute it among my colleagues, but actually everybody has already read it. We have received it electronically and everybody has seen. Of course, we have distributed it, and we are very receptive of all such calls. But I think we are also extremely curious to see this study that is in the pipeline, which would give concrete examples what we do wrong actually, because this is on this basis that we can act. Thank you.
At this moment, I don't know if I will continue in the Legal Affairs Committee as a coordinator, as a member, or if I will be put elsewhere in the House. But I will take this paper with me and really read it thoroughly when issues are coming up that relates to your different points. And a call for action is something that I usually take very seriously. So
you will not proactively agitate this going back to your office?
Well, we don't have an office at this moment. We are now in the process of negotiations when it comes to committee chairs, distribution of seats, and so on and so forth. And I will conduct those negotiations, and after that I will come back to you and tell you the outcome, if I'm there or if someone has been wise enough to put me elsewhere. We'll see.
Thank you all, and good luck. Time is out. Time has come for Lars-Erik to do his closing statement, and it's time for me to say thank you and goodbye.
I think you deserve a special thank you because you jumped into this job 2 days ago, and I think you made a fantastic job today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We, the representatives of the Nordic Directors Institutes, are of course very pleased with the fact that we got such good responses from the representatives of EU and the representative of Finland and Sweden today. I think we are more convinced now that you will be thinking of the Nordic corporate governance model in the future, and take that into account when you are judging whether a proposal is good or bad from a number of aspects, not only from the Nordic point of view, of course. Thank you for being here and coming here, and special thank you to you, Sonja. You are brave entering the lion's den, and you took the effort and time to travel all the way, so special thank you to you. And a big thank you to all speakers and our partners. You done fantastic presentations, and I must say that if you are as excited as I am after this morning, we really managed to organize this conference well. We had 4 themes, and what a surprise. Here are the 4 themes we tried to cover, and hopefully we learned some more about internationalization, diversity, sustainability, and business intelligence. Hopefully our knowledge and experience in these 4 fields has improved after this day. That's what I'm hoping anyway, and that's the case for me myself. It's a constant learning process to become a better, more professionalized board director. That's my experience. It takes time. What else? Yes, I want to invite you all to continue the dialogue we started at the LinkedIn group of Ecoda and of StyrelseAkademien, but also on Twitter and Facebook, and not the least on the upcoming events. We will have several events organized in Europe before we have the final event at our 10th anniversary in Ecoda next spring. So you are all invited to take part in this discussion. You find contact information to all our institutes in the app and at the homepage of ecoda.org. That's the address. Finally, I would like to thank the steering group and the project group for organizing this conference. You've done a great job. And also here, I want to express a special thank you to Susanne. I don't think I'm not convinced that you'll like what I say now, but to me it has looked as you have been fighting like a tiger to make this conference a success. I'm not to tell you whether that's truth or not, but perhaps the applause can convince you. Thank you. And now, finally, you are welcome to the atrium outside to have a light lunch and continue the discussions we started. Perhaps you can take into consideration that some of us also will listen to the choir of the Stockholm School of Economics. They will sing some really nice songs for us. I think that's a good start of the summer. Thank you all, and have a nice summer. Thank you.